My sister's wedding was tomorrow when I found out she'd been having an affair with my husband for 2 years. I never thought I'd be the kind of person writing one of these stories, but here I am at 2 a.m., still processing what happened over the last 6 months. My hands are shaking as I type this, not from anger anymore, but from the sheer relief of finally being free. It started last September, the day before my younger sister Emma's wedding. She was marrying Marcus, this supposedly perfect guy she'd been dating for 3 years. Everyone loved Marcus, he was charming, successful, came from money. My parents were over the moon about the match. Emma had always been the golden child, the prettier one, the one who got straight A's and went to Yale while I went to state school. I wasn't bitter about it, or at least I told myself I wasn't. I had my own life, a good job as a marketing director, a beautiful house in the suburbs, and James, my husband of 8 years. James and I had been together since college. He was my first everything, first real boyfriend, first love, first heartbreak when we briefly broke up junior year, and then my first everything all over again when we got back together. We'd built a life together. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our favorite restaurants. Sure, things had gotten a bit stale lately. He'd been working late a lot, seemed distracted, but I attributed it to stress from his new promotion. He was a software engineer at a major tech company, and the pressure had been intense. I'd been trying to be supportive, giving him space, not nagging when he came home past midnight or fell asleep on the couch instead of coming to bed. The day before Emma's wedding, I came home early from work with a migraine. The wedding preparations had been exhausting. Emma had me running around for months as her maid of honor, dealing with vendors, managing bridesmaids, handling my mother's anxiety about every tiny detail. My head was pounding, and all I wanted was to pop some Advil and sleep in a dark room until the rehearsal dinner that evening. I parked in the garage and came in through the kitchen, not really paying attention to anything except getting to my medicine cabinet. That's when I heard it, laughter coming from upstairs. Not just any laughter, but Emma's distinctive giggle, the one she'd had since she was 5 years old. My first thought was confusion. Emma was supposed to be at the spa with her bridesmaids getting their nails done. She'd texted me photos just an hour ago of them all in robes, champagne glasses raised. But that was definitely her voice, and it was coming from my bedroom. Then I heard another voice, deeper, familiar, James. My husband, who was supposed to be in Portland on a business trip until tonight, who was going to miss the rehearsal dinner because his flight wouldn't land until 10. My body knew before my brain did. That cold feeling that starts in your chest and spreads outward like ice water in your veins. I stood frozen in my kitchen, my purse still on my shoulder, my keys still in my hand. The rational part of my brain tried to come up with explanations. Maybe James had come home early to surprise me. Maybe Emma had come to drop something off and ran into him. Maybe they were planning some kind of surprise for the wedding. But even as I tried to convince myself, I was already moving toward the stairs, my feet silent on the carpet. Each step felt like it took an hour. I could hear them talking now, their voices low and intimate. I heard my name mentioned, then Marcus's, then more laughter. When I reached the landing, I could see my bedroom door was cracked open. Through the gap, I saw them. They were in my bed, our bed. The bed James and I had picked out together at Pottery Barn, arguing over whether to get the king or the California king. Emma was wearing the silk robe from her bridal party, the one that said "bride" on the back in cursive letters. It was hanging open. James was shirtless, his arm around her, playing with her hair, the same way he used to play with mine when we were first dating. They looked comfortable, natural, like they'd done this 1,000 times before. The thing that broke me wasn't even the obvious betrayal. It was how happy they looked. James hadn't looked at me like that in at least 2 years. His face was lit up, animated, the way it used to be when we first fell in love. Emma was glowing, but not with normal pre-wedding excitement. This was different. This was the glow of a woman in love, and it wasn't for the man she was marrying tomorrow. I don't even remember how long I stood there, staring through that tiny crack in the door. Seconds. Minutes. My brain felt like it had split in half, one part screaming at me to throw the door open, to scream and destroy everything in that room, and another part whispering, "Stay quiet. Watch. Learn." Somehow, the quiet part won. I slipped back down the hallway, my legs moving mechanically, like I was operating them from outside my own body. I ended up in the guest room, shutting the door silently and collapsing on the bed, my body shaking with adrenaline. I didn't cry right away. Instead, I felt this numb, detached calm. My hands went to my purse, digging out my phone with trembling fingers. I opened the camera app and just sat there, staring at the screen. What was I supposed to do? Record it. Confront them. Call Marcus. My thoughts spun like a tornado until finally, instinct took over. I switched to the voice memo app, turned up the sensitivity, and slid the phone under the door frame toward the hall. From that angle, it picked up muffled voices but clear enough to understand. And what I heard shredded what little hope I had left. Emma, don't worry. She won't be back until dinner. She always takes forever with Mom at these things. James, I still don't know why you're going through with tomorrow. You don't love him. Emma, it's not about love. It's security, it's family expectations. Marcus gives me stability. You give me passion. James, you can't keep stringing both of us along. Eventually someone's going to get hurt. Emma, relax. After tomorrow, things will settle. She'll be too busy being the perfect maid of honor to notice anything. And Marcus, he'll never suspect a thing. I covered my mouth to keep from making a sound. My own sister, my husband, my family, and the way they spoke, so casual, so entitled, like my pain was nothing more than a minor obstacle to be worked around. That's when I did start crying. Quiet, hot tears that burned my cheeks as I curled up on the guest bed. I couldn't even think straight. The rehearsal dinner was in 4 hours. People would be expecting me. My mom would panic if I didn't show. And tomorrow, the whole extended family and Marcus's entire network would gather to watch Emma walk down the aisle. With my husband's eyes still on her, I barely made it through the rehearsal dinner. Somehow, I plastered on a smile, fixed my makeup, and endured Emma's endless chatter about her dream day. James didn't show up. He stuck to his cover story about being in Portland, texting me little check-ins like everything was normal. Every word felt like a knife in my chest, and every time Emma touched Marcus's arm or leaned into his shoulder, I had to fight the urge to scream, "She doesn't love you! She's been sleeping with my husband in my bed." But I said nothing. That night, I went home alone. James's flight wasn't landing until late, so I had the house to myself. Except I couldn't bear to go into our bedroom. I stayed in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, feeling like my entire life had cracked open and all the ugly truths were spilling out. I thought about calling Marcus, about sending him the voice recording right then and there, but something inside me whispered, "Wait, not yet. Don't act on raw rage. Let them hang themselves with their own words." So I started digging. We had these little Wi-Fi security cameras. James had insisted on installing them a year ago, just in case. One was in the living room, one in the kitchen, one in the office. Not in the bedrooms, because privacy, but I remembered something important. James had tinkered with them to set up a cloud storage backup. If I logged into the account, maybe, just maybe. It took me an hour to remember the login. My hands were shaking so badly I had to type the password 3 times. But when the feed popped up, I felt like I'd swallowed a rock. The archives went back weeks, and there they were. Clips of Emma letting herself in with the spare key, James arriving 10 minutes later, the two of them cuddling on the couch like newlyweds. At one point, Emma even brought over a bag of groceries, and they cooked dinner together like it was their home. I watched until I couldn't anymore. The timestamps made it undeniable. They'd been doing this for years. Whole weekends when I thought James was on business trips. Days when Emma claimed she was stressed with wedding planning, but was really spending the afternoon in my house, in my husband's arms. It's strange. The more evidence I gathered, the calmer I became. The shock turned into clarity. If they'd fooled me for 2 years, then they thought I was weak. They thought I'd never notice, never act. But I wasn't weak. I just hadn't been paying attention. By the time dawn came, I had a plan. I texted James in the morning, pretending everything was normal. Told him I hoped his flight had landed safely, reminded him of the ceremony time. He replied with the usual, "Can't wait to see you, love you." My skin crawled reading the words, but I saved every message. At the church, the chaos of wedding prep provided the perfect cover. Everyone was running around with flowers, dresses, photographers. Emma was glowing in her gown, our mom tearing up every 2 minutes. No one noticed that I was unusually quiet, sticking to the background. But Marcus noticed. He pulled me aside before the ceremony, his voice low. "You okay? You look pale." Something in his eyes, concern, maybe intuition, made my throat tighten. I almost told him everything right then. Almost handed him the phone with the recording queued up. But instead, I just smiled weakly and said, "It's just nerves. You're about to become family." The words nearly choked me. The ceremony itself was a blur. I stood by Emma's side holding her bouquet, smiling for the pictures, all while my stomach twisted with every word of the vows. For better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, I wanted to scream, "You don't mean any of this. You're lying to him. You're lying to everyone." But I stayed silent, because my revenge wasn't going to be a scene at the altar. No. My revenge was going to be precise, devastating, and unforgettable. That night, at the reception, I put the next phase of my plan into motion. While everyone danced and drank champagne, I slipped into a side room with Marcus. He looked startled when I asked to talk, but he followed. My hands were shaking as I held out my phone and said, "There's something you need to see." And then I hit play. The look on his face as he listened, that mixture of confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror, was almost too much to bear. But it was nothing compared to what would happen next. Because Marcus wasn't the kind of man who kept things bottled up. Marcus stared at my phone like it was a live grenade in his hands. His jaw clenched and unclenched as the recording played Emma's laughter, James's voice, the casual cruelty of their words. When the clip ended, he didn't move. He didn't breathe. He just stood there, eyes fixed on the screen as if willing it to make sense. Finally, he looked up at me. "How long?" His voice was quiet, too quiet. "2 years," I whispered, "at least. I found out yesterday." Something in his face broke. He let out a shaky laugh, but there was no humor in it. Unbelievable. I gave up job offers in New York to stay here with her. I thought she was God. I thought she was everything. He sank into a chair, running both hands through his hair. For a moment, I felt guilty. Not because of Emma or James, they'd chosen this, but because I had just detonated Marcus's life on what should have been his happiest day. He was still in his tux, still wearing the boutonniere Emma had picked out. He looked like a man on stage who suddenly realized the entire play was a lie. "Why didn't you stop the wedding?" he demanded suddenly, his eyes snapping back to me. "Because," I said, my voice steadier now than it had been in days, "you deserve to decide how this ends, not me, not them, you." He stood up abruptly, pacing the room like a caged animal. For a second, I thought he was going to march back into the reception hall and blow everything apart right then and there. But instead, he stopped, turned to me, and asked the one question I hadn't expected. "What do you want to do?" The question hit me like a physical blow. No one had asked me that, not James, not Emma, not even myself. For months, maybe years, I had been moving through life on autopilot. But now I had a choice. I want them exposed, I admitted. I want them to feel the humiliation they thought they could hide. But I also don't want to ruin your family in the middle of this party. I don't want to give them the satisfaction of turning this into chaos they can twist against us. Marcus studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, then we do this smart. We don't blow up here, we plan. And when the hammer falls, it'll be on our terms." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I wasn't alone in this after all. We slipped back into the reception separately, both of us wearing the practiced masks of celebration. Emma was radiant on the dance floor, twirling in her white gown, while James, my husband, watched from the sidelines, pretending to be just the brother-in-law. I caught his eyes once, and he smiled at me like nothing was wrong. My skin crawled. The next few weeks were hell. James came home, acting like the perfect husband, bringing me flowers, cooking dinner, even suggesting we reconnect with a weekend getaway. Every gesture was a dagger. Meanwhile, Emma and Marcus returned from their honeymoon to a beautiful new house Marcus had bought for them. Emma bragged about it constantly in the family group chat, posting pictures of her decorating while Marcus stayed quiet. I kept in touch with Marcus privately. We'd meet for coffee under the guise of discussing family logistics. But really, we were strategizing. Marcus had pulled financial records, proving he'd been the one funding most of Emma's lifestyle. He found text messages on their shared iPad where Emma had been sloppy, leaving traces of her conversations with James. Between that and my video evidence, we had an airtight case. The question was how and when to use it. Marcus wanted to serve divorce papers with everything attached. He wanted scorched earth. I understood his rage, but I also knew my parents would be collateral damage. They adored Emma. Exposing her would shatter them. And as much as I wanted revenge, I couldn't stomach destroying my family completely. Then fate made the decision for us. It happened at my parents' anniversary dinner, a big family gathering at a fancy restaurant, with relatives from out of town, champagne flowing, speeches prepared. James sat beside me, his hand resting casually on mine as if he wasn't secretly in love with my sister. Emma and Marcus arrived late, Emma glowing as always, Marcus stone-faced. Halfway through the meal, Marcus stood up, raising his glass. "A toast," he said, his voice steady but loud enough to command the room. "To love, to loyalty, and to honesty in marriage." Emma giggled, squeezing his arm. Here, here, she chimed in, clearly oblivious. Marcus's eyes swept the table, then landed squarely on James. Funny thing about honesty. Some people take vows and some people break them. Some people promise forever while sneaking around behind the backs of the ones who trust them most. The table fell silent. Forks clinked against plates, and my mother looked around in confusion. Marcus, sweetheart, what are you? He cut her off, pulling out his phone. Why don't we let the evidence speak for itself? And then he hit play. The restaurant filled with Emma's voice. Her laughter. James's voice. Their words about me, about Marcus, about their little arrangement. Gasps echoed around the table. My father's face went pale, my mother clutched her pearls like a cliché, and Emma froze her fork halfway to her mouth. Marcus, turn it off! She hissed, her face white. But Marcus didn't stop. He let the whole recording play, and when it ended, the silence was deafening. James shot to his feet, sputtering. This is out of context. Out of context, Marcus snarled. You were in her bed the night before our wedding. My mother started crying. My father demanded answers. And me, I sat there silent watching them unravel. For once, I didn't feel weak or broken. I felt powerful. Emma tried to spin it, claiming it had been a mistake, a whole time lapse in judgment. But Marcus shut her down with the cold efficiency of a man whose love had curdled into hatred. He pulled out the financial documents, the text logs, everything. The evidence piled up until Emma had nowhere left to hide. James looked at me, desperate. Please, it didn't mean. I finally spoke. My voice was calm, almost eerily so. Save it, you've been lying for years. You both have. I'm done listening. The dinner ended in chaos. Emma fled the restaurant, my mother chasing after her. James tried to follow me to the car, but I locked the doors before he could get in. Marcus shook my hand in the parking lot, his expression grim but resolute. We burn it all down, he said, and I nodded. That night, for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. Because the truth was out. There was no going back now. The days after that dinner felt like living in the aftermath of a hurricane. Everything was broken, scattered, unrecognizable. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls from my mother, texts from Emma that ranged from begging to blaming, voicemails from James alternating between sobbing apologies and angry demands that I fix this mess. But I didn't answer. Not a single one. For once in my life, I didn't feel obligated to clean up after other people's chaos. Instead, I called a lawyer. It was surprisingly easy, almost anticlimactic, to start the divorce process. I walked into her office with a neat little folder, screenshots, recordings, copies of financial statements Marcus had shared. She flipped through them, her expression unreadable, then finally said, "You have more than enough. This won't take long." James didn't fight me on the divorce, not really. Oh, he raged and threatened at first, accused me of airing our private business. But when his own family sided with me after hearing the evidence, he caved. The house was sold, the assets divided. I kept my retirement account, most of the savings, and the car. He walked away with less than he'd expected, and though it wasn't the dramatic punishment I secretly craved, it was justice, cold, practical justice. Emma's life unraveled even faster. Marcus filed for divorce immediately, serving her papers the morning after the anniversary dinner. He moved out of their new house within a week, leaving her alone with a mortgage she couldn't afford. My parents tried to shield her at first, clinging to the idea that she was their baby, who just made a mistake. But when more evidence trickled out, old text chains, emails, even photos Emma had been careless enough to leave in cloud backups, they couldn't deny it anymore. For months, family gatherings were a battlefield. My mother cried constantly, blaming herself for raising two daughters who hated each other. My father went quiet, retreating into long walks and longer silences. At one point, he asked me bluntly, "Do you think we failed you both?" I didn't know how to answer. It wasn't their fault James and Emma betrayed me. But maybe they'd never noticed how much Emma had been spoiled, how much I'd been overlooked. The surprising part was Marcus. After the dust settled, he and I kept talking, not about the betrayal but about everything else. Our lives, our work, the strange emptiness that comes after rage burns out. There was no romance, not at first, just companionship. Two survivors clinging to the only other person who understood the scope of the wreckage. But over time, that companionship grew. Slowly, cautiously, like a plant pushing up through cracked pavement. Marcus was nothing like James. Where James had been secretive, Marcus was transparent. Where James made me feel like I was never enough, Marcus made me feel seen. I didn't fall into it blindly. I had walls, boundaries, therapy sessions that stretched for months. But eventually, I let myself believe in the possibility of love again. Emma, meanwhile, spiraled. She moved back in with my parents for a while, sulking around the house, alternating between denial and self-pity. She sent me a long letter once, claiming she'd never meant to hurt me, and that she couldn't help who she loved. I ripped it up without reading past the first paragraph. I didn't owe her forgiveness, not now, maybe not ever. The biggest turning point came at Christmas. My parents insisted on having everyone together, for the sake of family. I almost refused, but Marcus encouraged me to go. Face it head on, he said, show them you're not broken. So I went. Emma was there, pale and thin, her smile brittle. James wasn't. He'd moved across the country by then, trying to rebuild his own life. The tension in the room was unbearable at first, every word dripping with things unsaid. But then, something shifted. My father raised a glass and said, "To new beginnings." And for the first time, my parents looked at me, not Emma, as the daughter who had survived, who had shown strength. That night, I realized I didn't need Emma's apology. I didn't need James's remorse. I had already won by moving forward when they were still trapped in their lies. The months turned into a year. The divorce finalized. Emma's marriage officially ended. Marcus and I started seeing each other openly, though we took it slow to avoid gossip. My career flourished. I poured my grief and anger into work, landing a promotion I'd been chasing for years. I bought a townhouse downtown, modern and light-filled, a space that was entirely mine. No ghosts of James, no memories of Emma. Just me, rebuilding, and the strangest thing happened. I felt happy. Not the fragile surface-level happiness I'd faked for so long, but a deep, grounded peace. Sometimes I still think about that day, the moment I stood outside my bedroom door, hearing their laughter, feeling my world shatter. I thought it was the end of everything, but in hindsight, it was the beginning. The beginning of seeing my own worth, of realizing I deserved better than crumbs of love from people who never valued me. Emma and I don't speak anymore. Maybe someday we will, maybe not. But I don't carry the weight of her betrayal anymore. That burden belongs to her now. James sent me an email recently. Just a few lines, saying he regretted everything and hoped I'd found happiness. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because I have friends who stuck by me, parents who finally saw me, a partner who respects me, and most importantly, a version of myself that is stronger, braver, and freer than I ever imagined. It turns out betrayal doesn't have to destroy you. Sometimes, it can strip away the lies and leave behind the raw truth of who you are. And for me, that truth was simple: I am enough. I always